Hello and welcome to this webinar on the Performance Management Program. This video will give a brief refresher of the 2015-2016 PMP closeout. During this webinar, we will cover some key highlights about this year's PMP cycle. We will go over the timeline and required documentation. We will review some tips for evaluating performance and conducting the year-end discussion. And if you will be entering information into the online PMP rating site, we will show you how you can access a brief training video to help you navigate and troubleshoot through that system. I want to start off by emphasizing some key messages about this year's PMP cycle. To make sure that we are in compliance with DPA rule, all supervisors are required to complete mandatory PMP training. This will occur each year prior to the start of the PMP cycle. For the 2015-2016 cycle, supervisors completed this in February. This webinar is offered as a voluntary refresher for supervisors in conjunction with that mandatory training. We just want to re-emphasize that final PMP ratings must be approved by the reviewer before those final ratings are communicated to the employee. If employees disagree with their final PMP rating, they are afforded the opportunity to engage in dispute resolution, where higher level authorities and a standing dispute resolution panel will review the evaluations to weigh in on the final PMP rating. The Human Resources contact for handling disputes is Vern Jackson, and his contact information is listed on the screen. We also want to emphasize that the PMP cycle does not begin until April 1st. Information entered prior to April 1st in the PMP online rating site will not be saved. The system will refresh on April 1st so that supervisors and coordinators can enter the rating information. Supervisors may not begin conducting year-end discussions until April 1st. However, we do encourage that you start scheduling the sessions on your calendar now for the period between April 1st to April 30th. And finally, any employees starting with CDHS after March 1st, 2016 will not be included in this PMP cycle. All other employees are included. Let's go over the timeline and required documentation for PMP. The annual PMP cycle goes from April 1st to March 31st each year. Final ratings are due to HR by April 30th, but please keep in mind that there is also a review process where the next level supervisor signs off on the final ratings. So you need to be sure to work with your reviewers to understand how much time they need to review ratings so that you can still meet this April 30th deadline. Also due by April 30th are PMP plans for next year's cycle. So just as an aside, the new PMP plans for the 2016-2017 cycle do not need to be sent to HR. They simply reside in the supervisor file until closeout next year. The actual PMP forms and other forms are due to be scanned to HR by May 31st. PMP disputes need to be resolved by June 26th. The interim review is due October 31st. However, similar to the 2016-2017 PMP, it will reside with the supervisor until next year's closeout. This is a list of the forms that need to be reviewed during the final PMP meeting. In particular, we really need to make sure we know who is on a flex place agreement. Anyone who is on a flex place agreement needs to have this renewed each year, so please make sure if you have someone on flex place that you are updating this each year and sending in the forms along with the PMP forms. And these forms are all located on the CDHS intranet. Also, please note that you will need to send in certificates for mandatory reporter training for any of your new employees to the PMP cycle. So this includes anyone that started after March 1st, 2015. All other employees that included the certificate with their paperwork last year will just need to have the certificate on file, but it does not need to be turned in. Your division's PMP coordinators are responsible for collecting all final PMP documents as well as these related forms. PMP coordinators will scan copies of these materials to HR for placement in the employee's personnel file. There are some special situations that may come up. For new employees, a performance plan is required within 30 days of their start date. For example, anyone hired in the month of March would not be included in this PMP cycle. However, a new PMP plan would need to be developed for the 2016-2017 cycle within 30 days of their start date. If you have any employees on family medical leave or long-term disability during this closeout, supervisors can obtain a waiver from our HR PMP coordinator. Just email cdhs.pmap@state.co.us to get that waiver. A departing supervisor is supposed to complete an interim evaluation for all of his or her subordinate employees, including rating the employee prior to departing. And then new supervisors would complete new PMPs for all of their new employees. The new supervisor would take the old supervisor's interim PMPs into consideration when determining the final rating of employees. Similar for employees who transfer into CDHS, the supervisor losing the employee is supposed to complete an interim evaluation, complete with a rating, and the receiving supervisor is supposed to complete the final PMP, taking into consideration the interim plan from the previous supervisor. For employees separating from CDHS, the supervisor losing the employee is supposed to complete a final PMP evaluation along with rating. And that PMP is typically sent to HR along with the HR2 to separate them. PMPs are not required for employees that retire. However, we highly recommend that you still complete one for retirees. We do tend to see a number of retirees return to CDHS for work, and it would be good to have that plan on file. Finally, we do not do PMPs for temporary employees. We will turn next to some suggestions for how to evaluate your employees and conduct the final performance review session. There are 6 key actions that need to happen to complete the final PMP closeout process. First, supervisors need to prepare for the meeting by gathering relevant information related to the employee's performance. Second, review and evaluate all the information you have collected to determine preliminary ratings for each competency, as well as an overall rating. Third, obtain the approval of the reviewer for the ratings. Fourth, conduct the final review meeting with the employee. Fifth, get the required signatures for all associated forms. And finally, provide a final rating and all the signed forms to your unit or division's PMP coordinator, who is responsible for inputting the rating and sending the forms to HR. So let's look at each of these steps in more detail. Make sure to schedule the review session in advance to give yourself and your employee time to prepare. Make sure you bring copies of the plan to review and ask the employee to be prepared with their own thoughts on their performance over the past year. What results would they like to share, a summary of their accomplishments, and even areas of opportunity to work on in the new year. Half of the discussion should focus on the previous year, and half should really focus on next year's plan and goals. The supervisor needs to take time to review performance information, which can come from a variety of sources. The plan should reflect the entire year's performance. In order to capture information throughout the year, we recommend supervisors keep a file where relevant information about the employee is recorded. This can be sometimes referred to as a significant events file, and it's a place where you keep notes about your employees' accomplishments, successes, kudos from customers, and to document any performance issues, coaching conversations, and follow-up actions based on those conversations. I know it can be difficult to find the time to document this, but it is a tremendous help for leaders to keep track of performance throughout the year rather than trying to remember details from 9, 10, 12 months ago. Self-evaluations are not required, but they are another way for you to help you determine the final PMP rating for your employee. Also, customer and peer feedback is another source to take into consideration. The final thing to do before you prepare is make sure you are clear on the message you want to send to your employee, especially if you are new to doing performance plans. It's a good idea to jot down some of the key messages you want to get across so you make sure you cover everything. Consider doing this for each and every competency. Let's take a minute to review the rating system. You will evaluate each employee on a 3-point rating scale. Level 1 encompasses employees who are not meeting performance expectations. Level 2 encompasses employees that are overall proficient at their jobs. They're doing everything you ask of them, and they are occasionally exceeding expectations. Level 3 employees are consistently exceeding expectations. They are your outstanding employees. I'm going to focus on how you differentiate between the Level 2 and Level 3 ratings. And there are some key words in the definition to really keep in mind. PMP Level 2 is a good rating. Some employees may feel Level 2 is average, but in reality this rating indicates the employee is doing everything we ask of them, and sometimes more. These employees are valued members of the team. They occasionally exceed expectations, reliably perform their assignments, and may have some documented impact beyond their regular duties. A Level 3 consistently exceeds expectations, is a role model for others, and advances the mission of the organization. Regular feedback with your employees is crucial to aligning the team's expectations of what constitutes exceptional performance. And when you are rating employees, there should be no major surprises. You should be providing your employee with feedback throughout the year so that the review is an overall summary of the conversations and coaching you have already provided and an opportunity to start planning for the next year. In terms of evaluating performance, you need to consider all the relevant information that you have collected yourself and from others. Consider asking the employee to self-evaluate their performance and then using your best judgment to arrive at the final ratings based on all of this collected information. A few things we encourage you to consider as you are finalizing the plan. Don't let one or two minor incidents overwhelm otherwise good performance. This is easy to do if the incident recently happened, but remember you are evaluating the whole year and you are looking for patterns of performance. Did the employee miss a deadline recently, but they have been consistently on time the whole year? Don't let that one deadline cloud your judgment. The only caveat I have to that is if the incident or incidents were really critical and had a significant impact on the unit or the organization. Similarly, don't let a recent win gloss over an employee that has exhibited consistently poor performance throughout the year. If the employee has struggled over the year, you can take into consideration the efforts they have made to improve or made progress, but only to an extent. At some point, that employee needs to be held accountable for their work. Lastly, don't give someone a rating because you want to avoid having a tough conversation. You are doing a disservice to yourself, the employee, and your team if you are rating someone as a 2 that should really be a 1 because you want to avoid a conflict. We mentioned that the reviewer needs to approve the PMP ratings before they are communicated to the employee. And be prepared because the approver may ask for additional documentation or justification before approving the rating. A question we sometimes get is, can the reviewer override the final PMP rating? And the answer is yes. But we encourage supervisors and reviewers to have good conversations about the employee in question and the justification for the rating given to come to a consensus. Keep in mind that some divisions may have an escalated review process, particularly for Level 1 and Level 3 ratings. If you are unsure, ask your division's leadership. In terms of conducting the meeting, here are a few suggestions. Take the time to review each competency rating and the overall rating. Summarize your observations and any peer customer observations with the employee. Explain to the individual how those observations led you to choosing that rating. Again, there should be no surprises since you have been giving regular feedback to the employee throughout the year. If you haven't been providing regular feedback, you run the risk of employees feeling blindsided by their ratings. Without regular feedback, an individual is unable to reinforce behavior that exceeds your expectations and correct behavior that doesn't. And this can result in some very awkward conversations and ultimately some disputes. Remember to focus on the employee's work performance based on the plan you created and reviewed with them from the previous year or at the beginning of their employment if they're newer to CGHS. And make sure you review the rating scale we use. This way the employee understands the criteria we use to rate performance. I always encourage supervisors to use the PMP review session as a way to communicate to the employee the value they bring to the organization. This is especially helpful if we are facing difficult budgetary times and we're not able to attach a lot of pay to performance. Useful for employees who are rated a 2 who believe they really should be a 3. And just to emphasize, a Level 2 is actually a really high standard to meet because they are your employees that are doing everything you ask for them and occasionally exceeding those expectations. We would not be able to run our agency without their hard work, and it's really important to communicate that to the employee. And of course, you need to obtain all the signatures needed for those required forms that we mentioned. There is a checklist you can refer back to located on our PMP intranet site under the Human Resources page. This review session is also a great opportunity to review next year's PMP plan, although you can schedule a separate meeting if you prefer. Some of you may be wondering what to do if you have an employee with unsatisfactory performance. If an employee's final overall PMP rating ends up being a 1, a PIP or corrective action is required. It is at the discretion of the supervisor which one you want to choose. We will review each of those on the next slide, what those similarities and differences are. But here are some general suggestions for how to manage performance that is not satisfactory. Identify what specifically needs to improve and come up with a plan for what actions need to take place to try and remedy the behavior. Incorporate the employee into this action plan by asking them for suggestions on how they can improve. Ask them what support they need to accomplish the plan. Do they need a refresher on how to do certain job duties? Are there manuals, policies, procedures that need to be reviewed? Does the individual need to be paired with a mentor or another employee? Do you need more regular reviews of performance? If they are part of the solution, they are more likely to follow through on the action plan. Then be sure to follow up with the individual on a regular basis to check in on progress and continue to give additional support if needed. There are a few differences between a PIP and a corrective action. The PIP, or Performance Improvement Plan, is an informal plan to improve, and it is not placed in an individual's personnel file. On the other hand, a corrective is a formal plan to improve initiated by the appointing authority, and it is placed in an individual's personnel file. The corrective is typically the first step towards further disciplinary action. Both options are used to identify areas for improvement and actions that the individual needs to take to improve. They both include the timeline and due dates for those actions, as well as the plan for follow-up. Templates and guidance for correctives can be found with your assigned HR generalist. So getting back to closeout, I mentioned that once you have conducted your one-on-one reviews and you have all your forms signed, you will work with your area's PMP coordinator, who is responsible for tracking completion and entering the ratings in our online PMP rating site, as well as gathering all the required forms and scanning them to HR. For those that will be entering their own information into the PMP Ratings online site, please look at the link at the top of the page that will take you to the site. And we also have a brief video to show you how to navigate and troubleshoot through the system. The link for that video is located on the CDHS intranet under the Human Resources page. Go to our PMP page and you will see the link there. I want to thank you for watching today's refresher on the PMP closeout. I hope you found it useful and have a wonderful day.